Well, I don't have the same fashion sense as Mimi, considering hers is a lot better than mine. I did at least was able to find a cowboy hat, although this is purple and Mimi's is kind of pink, so that's what we get. Um, it actually kind of looks like one of the Lady Gaga hats from Joanne, one of her albums. Yeah. So the hat's gonna go back here now. Mostly because I don't particularly care for hats that often. And of course, we have Mimi, Tachikawa, Mimi Tachikawa. She is the DigiDestined of Sincerity out of the original group. And her Digimon partner is Tanamon, if it will stay on my hands. Yay, Tanamon. I think out of the original 7, I think Tanamon / Palmon was my favorite. Not that I didn't like Biomon or Agumon or the rest of the group. I just think Tanamon was my favorite because, I mean, come on, it's a talking plant. And of course, Palmon had the big flower on her head that I always thought was very pretty. And so we have Tanamon. Tanamon, of course, digivolves into Palmon, which digivolves into Togemon, who is a giant cactus. And then Togemon digivolves into Lilymon, which I have some flowers back here. We have some lilies, which are the kind of purplish ones. And then Lilymon in Digimon Tri digivolves into Rosemon. And that's why I have some roses back here. And then, of course, the Digimon Omnimon Merciful mode with all the rest. So we're going to put Tanamon over here so that way she can keep an eye on the flowers. That'll work. I have my Crest of Sincerity shirt. Again, like with all the Disney shirts, I have no connection to these things. I just like them, and I figure if I'm going to wear them in the video, I might as well put in a plug for whoever did make them, for the person that made them. Of course, we kind of know a little bit about Mimi's past. Mimi has her parents, who I'll go over on her relationships a little bit later. She saw the battle between Parrotmon and Red Greymon back in 1995, like the rest of the group. As I mentioned in Joe's video, she seemed to live underneath Joe at the time. In the Digimon, in the first movie, Sora makes a comment about, to Tai. I was like, well, Mimi told me that you were the one that threw up in my hat. So I don't know if that's supposed to mean that, like, they knew Mimi at the same time or what. I don't know. It could have just been like, yeah, just throw in one of the references to someone else. Okay. So we have that for Mimi. And then, that's in 1995. She's picked to be one of the DigiDestined. And then, 4 years later, they're all at the summer camp. They all get whooshed off to the digital world. She meets Palmon, or Tanamon, who is just adorable. And of course, Mimi is kind of the group's pacifist. I don't blame her. I don't have a problem with pacifists. It's just more because I am also to a degree a pacifist. It's just more, I don't like it when they will take pacifism as like being a coward. Where they use, like, they say, oh, I'm a pacifist, just to completely avoid having to deal with conflict. It was like, well, I'm a pacifist, so I'm not going to deal with any of this conflict, and I'm just going to go over in the corner. We do have some of those moments for Mimi, but she gets over them. That's part of her character arc that we go throughout the Digimon adventures through the original season, and not too much in Digimon Tri, because by the time Tri comes around, Mimi is a little bit more set in that way in regards to she's okay with having to fight when it's required of her. But of course, they introduce the Digimon. They have to fight Kawagumon, the Digimon Digivolve, and she gets Palmon, who, as I said, I just loved Palmon's flower on top of her head. And then, of course, they end up, they all travel around while they watch the others Digivolve. And at one point, there's this adorable moment, and it does show that Mimi is not 100% selfish. I mean, yes, Mimi whines and moans and, complains throughout a good portion of the first part of the series. It's hot. My feet hurt. This is boring. I don't want to be here. She's very sincere in all of those facts, which is, part of what she is. But one of the moments where we see that she is not as selfish as she appears to be is at one point when they're out in this desert area. I think it's when they're on their way to, when they make their way to the Biyomon village or whatever the case is, back when Sora digivolves for when Biyomon digivolves for the first time. On the way there, at one point, Mimi takes off her cowboy hat because Palmon is complaining about the heat as well. Mimi takes off her cowboy hat and puts it on Palmon, so that way Palmon has some shade as opposed to being 100% exposed to the sun. And it was like, I mean, like, it's a small gesture, but, you know, it shows that she's not entirely selfish. It's know that she's not as, you know, she is kind of spoiled. Her parents seem to be rather well off, but she doesn't appear to. That's not the only thing about her. And she was one of these kids that was chosen, so it can't be the only thing that's, you know, that's there. She can't just be this, you know, very shallow individual. Mimi does put a lot of time into her outward appearance, but, you know, a lot of the DigiDestined, you know, Matt kind of likes to look cool and everything, but, you know, Mimi also has a very good heart, like the rest of the DigiDestined. And then, of course, when Palmon digivolves for the first time, they are on their way traveling around the digital world, and they end up running into a bunch of these Digimon that are called Numamon, which are these little sludge green thingies. A bunch of them start trying to ask Mimi out on a date, which is a big no, because ew. And what ends up happening is, like, they get, you know, the group's in like a sewer system, and then they get chased and they run out of the sewer system. And, you know, one of the things is they end up in, like, the group all gets kind of separated a little bit. Not for, like, this is not like when Devimon separates them. This is before Devimon separates them. Mimi gets kind of separated from the rest of the group, and then they end up in this town that's just called Toy Town. And they see all the DigiDestined, not the Digimon, but they're DigiDestined, you know, kind of playing with the toys and acting kind of robotic. Like, this is so fun. I'm having so much fun. And, you know, just like, ha, 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 like, just like going through motions that aren't even 100%, you know, their minds have been messed with. And the group, you know, and Mimi and Palmon start looking around, and they end up finding a chest where all of the Digimon have been put into, and they're like, Mimi, Palmon, you gotta get us out of here. There's a Digimon here that's called Manzemon. Manzemon is a big teddy bear type Digimon. He is supposed to guard over the toy town and, like, keep an eye on all the toys, and, you know, have them there so that way when kids come along, or I guess when Digimon come along, they can play with the toys. And Manzemon is supposed to be a very kind and gentle Digimon. He's been messed with by a black gear, by Devimon, blah, 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 blah. So he's not doing it on his own. He's not doing it of his own volition. As are a lot of the Digimon at the beginning of the series that they end up interacting with. It shows that, you know, the Digimon are being controlled, but then we also get Devimon, who is obviously a bad Digimon. And then, of course, we have Ogremon, who starts out as a bad Digimon, and then by the end of the series, he is now an ally. By the end of the first season, he's now an ally. But what ends up happening is Mimi, this is when Palmon digivolves for the first time. And because Mimi and Palmon are the two that have to fight him, because the rest of the DigiDestined can't really connect with their Digimon right now. And they fight Manzemon, and he, Palmon digivolves into Togemon for the first time. And they defeat Manzemon, they get rid of the black gear, and he, you know, turns back into the nice big cuddly teddy bear that he's supposed to be, which is adorable. And he's just like, okay, now we're going to use what my power was actually meant for. And what he can do is he can send out, like, these hearts that, what had happened before was when he had sent them out when he was under the control of the black gear, it basically brainwashed the DigiDestined. But what it's supposed to do is, like, he's supposed to be able to send out these big hearts, and, like, they'll, like, kind of wrap you in a, like, the hearts will, like, wrap around you, and they'll give you, like, a big hug, is what they're supposed to do, as opposed to, oh no, now you're going to be kind of a little puppet for the toys to play with. So that's where that comes in. And of course the Numamon show up again. They kind of helped Mimi a little bit, but then they're like, no, please go out on a date with us. And she's just like, no. And she's just like, I don't remember, like, Mimi just, like, kicks them or throws them. I don't remember. But I don't blame her. I don't blame her in the slightest for not being particularly interested in the Numamon. You know, and of course there's a moment where they're all separated by Devimon, and Mimi and Izzy end up in this, you know, this labyrinth where, you know, Izzy is trying to figure out, ways to get around the labyrinth and everything. Mimi is just kind of upset, and Mimi runs off, and Tentamon follows her, and then Palmon is still with Izzy, so they don't have their rightful Digimon with them, and Mimi and Izzy, this is kind of where Mimi and Izzy have to kind of connect for the first time. And I like it when they have like the different DigiDestined have to like connect with each other. Sora and Joe have to connect in the Bakuman village. Ty and Matt kind of are more along the lines of they are each other's best friends, but there's also, they're still going to argue at times. And then, of course, with Mimi and Izzy, it's, Izzy is the brains and Mimi is the beauty. And, so we get that moment where they have to deal with Centarumon, and then, they save him, and they're now he's their friend, and they destroy a bunch of black gears and everything. So we get those moments, and of course they're all reunited, and they they defeat Devimon, and they watch what happens with Angemon. Unfortunately, they meet Genai's hologram, and I think Mimi comments on like Genai's wardrobe or something, because he's just like an old man in like weird robes. Of course, they make their way to the continent of Server, and as they're journeying around Server, at one point, they're dealing with Edamon and all of his cronies. There's a moment where they come across this giant cactus in the desert, and because there's a lot of deserts in the digital world, and I don't 100% remember if this is at the end of the episode or if they interact with the cactus at the beginning of the episode, but they find this giant cactus, and like Mimi had been like complaining about something like blah 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 blah, and then like there's a flower on top of the cactus and it blooms, and out pops the Crest of Sincerity, which is of course the crest that Mimi has. And that's when Mimi gets it, and she's like, I will strive to be as sincere as possible. And I think part of the group is like, please don't. Because, it's like you already complain enough. But of course, they're all being friends. And of course, there's the moment with what happens with Skull Greymon with Ty when Greymon digivolves into Skull Greymon and loses his confidence in himself. Mimi is one of the ones that still is very supportive of him. She's kind of one of the ones that forgives him rather quickly in regards to that, because like she knows that was not Ty's intention at all to have that happen to Greymon, to Agumon. Not what he wanted at all. He was just trying to protect them, and unfortunately he went about it the wrong way. They interact with Piximon, and Mimi thinks Piximon is adorable. Not that I blame her. Piximon is adorable. And of course then there's the Datamon battle where Ty and Metal Greymon now get swept away. And then of course when Ty and Agumon come back to the digital world, first they find TK, then they find Matt and Joe, and then Matt and TK go off and they end up finding Izzy, and Ty and Joe go off together, and they're going to go try to find either Mimi or Sora. And in this case, they end up finding this giant castle, which is home of ShogunGekkomon. And they end up going inside, and they end up meeting all these little like frog and tadpole type Digimon that are called Gekkomon and Otamamon. And they're like, oh, humans, what can we do for you? Our princess is busy at the moment, but what can we do for you? And they're like, princess? They're like, yes. And then Palmon comes to the stairs, and she's kind of dressed in a nice dress, and she's like, oh, Ty, Joe, Agumon, Gomamon, what are you doing here? And they're like, Palmon, what are you doing here? And she's like, well, Mimi and I came here a little while ago. And they're like, and the Gekkomon and the Otamamon are like, Princess Mimi. And they're like, yes, Princess Mimi. And then Mimi shows up, and she's, dressed as a princess, and she's been being treated like a princess by these Digimon because their leader, the Digimon's leader, ShogunGekkomon, had been okay, so ShogunGekkomon apparently had been in a singing contest, and he lost the singing contest, and he kind of put himself into like an eternal sleep because he was that conceited. And yeah, because he was that conceited. And the only way to wake him up is by having a voice that was as sweet as the one that put him, that's the one that he lost to wake him up, which I'm like, that seems kind of stupid. Why don't you just, make him wake up. But they're like, Mimi is the one that has to wake him up because she's the one with that type of a voice. And Demi Devimon, this is, Demi Devimon had like told her, told the Gekkomon and the Otamamon about her singing skills, and they're just like, oh, well, let's get Mimi and she can help us. And like Mimi tries and tries, and then like Mimi does honestly when she first arrives at the castle, she does try to wake up ShogunGekkomon, but she gets more and more pampered and spoiled by the Gekkomon and the Otamamon, to the point where now she's basically, well, if you want me to sing, I'm going to need, backup dancers, and I'm going to need a beautiful dress, and I'm going to need to make sure that I have a good night's sleep, and there's got to be really good food and really good music, and just like all this stuff. And like, the Gekkomon and the Otamamon are just, giving her everything that she wants in order to try to get her to wake up their leader. And what ends up happening is, Joe and Tai show up, as I said, and, they get angry at Mimi, or Mimi kind of gets angry at them because they try to, knock some sense into her. They don't actually try to like hurt her or anything, but they're just like, come on, Mimi, you got to do the right thing here. And she's just, kind of being a brat type of a thing. And that's part of Demi Devimon's plan, is he wants her crest of Sincerity to go dark, because supposedly if the crest goes dark, then then the Digimon, then their Digimon won't be able to Digivolve because they can't use the crest anymore. And what ends up happening is Matt, or Tai and Joe each try to wake up ShogunGekkomon by, they try singing, and that doesn't work. And Agumon and Gomamon try, and that doesn't work either because none of them can sing. Yeah, no. And none of them can sing, so that's just kind of funny to watch. And then they try to trick Mimi into like recording her singing, and like Palmon tries to help, and then Joe and Matt get thrown into the dungeon. And what ends up happening is Mimi is feeling terrible about what she did to her friends, and she ends up kind of having a nightmare about her crest going dark, and her friends, I think it's like she dreams about like her friends abandoning her. And, she kind of wakes up from the dream, and Sora's there. And Sora's like, Mimi, you have to do the right thing. You can't keep acting this way. You have to do what you told the Gekkomon and the Otamamon that you would do, where you need to wake up ShogunGekkomon, and you need to, let Joe and Matt, or, Joe and Tai out and everything. And Mimi, this is... I would call this when Mimi's crest activates for the first time, because it is kind of her finally being sincere in this case. Palmon does not digivolve in this case, or at least not at that exact moment. Later on is when she digivolves into Lilymon, but not yet. And what ends up happening is, then, the Tamamon and the Gekkomon bring Tai and Joe out, and they go into the, the room where the giant ShogunGekkomon is sleeping, and Mimi is there. And she's back in her regular clothes with her cowboy hat and everything. And she's just like, I'm sorry, everyone. I shouldn't have been acting the way that I was. I shouldn't have been, trying to get everything from you guys just in exchange for doing something that should have been very easy to do when I could have just been nice and done it in the first place. And then she sings, and she wakes up ShogunGekkomon. And unfortunately, ShogunGekkomon is not happy about this. And he ends up like attacking everyone, and then he's, the DigiDestined defeat him by, making him calm down. And, and then he's very sorry and everything. And, the Shogun, the Gekkomon and the Otamamon are still very happy with Mimi. She's still their friend, of course, because she did what she was supposed to. And then, the 7 of them are reunited, and they have to deal with Myotismon. And then, they end up getting, they meet Jedi again, and then they get sent back to the real world. And in the real world, we get, we get to meet Mimi's parents. She has a mom and a dad. At one point, like way back in the beginning of the series, she had made like a comment about the fact that it was like, I'm so bored, I even miss my little brother. And, Mimi's one of the ones that's an only child. Mimi and Izzy are the two that are like only childs, the only children. Cody is an only child in the second season, but that's for the second season. And, so she doesn't actually have she doesn't have any siblings. It was just, translation error. Probably not a translation error. They just threw it as like Mimi whining about it, because of course at the time when they got the original episodes, they're like, well, let's just say that she has a brother and then blah, 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 blah later. Yeah. And, so they end up back in the real world, of course. And there's a cute, Mimi is trying to pass Palmon off as a stuffed animal. And unfortunately, she kind of makes kind of a slightly snide comment to, about Palmon. And I was like, well, you're not the exact taste of stuffed animals I normally have. And Palmon goes, I'm in bad taste. And Mimi goes, no, you're not in bad taste. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. Type thing. And at one point, like, Mimi and Palmon are sitting out in front of Mimi's building because, apartment buildings are quite, abundant. And I think all of the Digimon live in apartment buildings. All the DigiDestined do. I don't think there's any of them that actually have a house in the original series that I can think of. Just because it's very common for people to live in apartments in Japan, unless you have enough money to be able to warrant, oh, we have a house and a yard. I think in later seasons, some of them actually have like a house, but that's different. But what ends up happening is, Mimi's out there and like Palmon is kind of like trying to soak up nutrients from the soil because of course she's a plant. She's, if she was a Pokemon, she'd be a grass type Pokemon. But she's not. She's kind of a grass type Digimon, so that still kind of applies to her. And like Mimi has like this like filtered mineral water that she, tries to like pour over Palmon's roots to give her some more nutrients and everything. I'll talk about Mimi's parents a little bit later, but they're there throughout this. And then of course then we get the moment where, Myotismon sends all of the Bakumon and everything else out to attack and gather up all the people, and Mimi and her parents are the ones that are among them that get taken to the TV station, community center place, whatever, and get taken there. And Mimi sees Sora there, and Palmon is kind of hiding underneath like this blanket, and she's like, I can digivolve whenever you need me. So they have that moment. And then Sora, when Sora does, the Bakumon lose their power at the convention center place, whatever, what ends up happening is, that's when, her mom and Beelmon show up and everything, and Sora gets Garudamon, has, her all the way up to Garudamon for Beelmon, and Mimi's parents kind of, get kind of attacked in this, and Mimi ends up telling her that, or, Togemon kind of gets hurt, and there's, this giant dinosaur type Digimon that's attacking them called Dark Tyrannomon, he's a Digimon that's been infected by a dark virus type thing, and not a control spire, not a black ring, not a black gear, just he's been infected by a Digimon virus or whatever. And Mimi is she's it's kind of the one of the moments where she's true to herself, and this this is when her Crest activates in battle for the first time, and that's when Togemon digivolves into Lilymon. And what ends up happening is she then is able to neutralize the Dark Tyrannomon, and she unfortunately gets hit by an attack by Myotismon that kind of causes her to freeze up. Sora is able to grab her with Garudamon, and they're able to escape. Mimi is still at the convention center, and she's put to sleep with the rest of all the rest of the people. But Mimi wakes up because of her Crest, because her Crest is protecting her, of course. And Wizardmon helps. Wizardmon helps heal Lilymon so she can be back into fighting mode. And then of course we have the whole everything happens with Wizardmon and Godamon and Kari and Angemon. Angemon comes along, and then they're able to defeat Myotismon. And then of course we have everything that happens with Venom Myotismon, and all the parents kind of being possessed a little bit, including Mimi's parents and Sora's mom. And the Arrows of Light and Hope and Wargreymon and Metal Garurumon, and they defeat Venom Myotismon. And then of course they have to go back to the digital world because Jenna is like, well, there's this problem with these guys called the Dark Masters, and giant rifts opening up between the real world and the digital world and the sky, and yeah, we kind of need help. And so that they go back to the digital world, and while they're there, unfortunately they keep losing friends. In their fight against Metal Seedramon, they end up losing Waymon and Pixiemon. And then they already lost Wizardmon just back in the real world, and after, after they or at one point either in a lull in the battle with Metal Seedramon, or after they defeat Metal Seedramon before they have to deal with like Puppetmon, Mimi makes these little, these little graves for them. And and there's a few others that they end up having to that they end up losing, unfortunately, in the process. A few other friends that they lost, because there was like these two little well, one of them kind of just looks like a giant pile of like the poop emoji, and it has like a little mouse friend, and like they had at one point they had like flirted with Mimi way back when, and Mimi, was, they were gone, they died, and we see them later on in Digimon Adventure 2.0, so we know that they end up getting reborn, but we see them later on, but Mimi is still very sad about them for, they lost them and everything, and it's, she this is where Mimi kind of has hit her breaking point. She doesn't want to go fight anymore, and she Matt and Ty are arguing and fighting each other at this point in time about what they're supposed to do. And Mimi just she's just like, I just want to go over here and I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to stare at the flowers, because it's it's like one of those moments where we see one of the DigiDestined reach kind of not their breaking point, but where it's like Mimi's reached her limit. She doesn't want to lose anyone else anymore. And that's, as I said, I don't blame people that, one of the reasons why they just, they don't like fighting is because they don't want to see anybody else get hurt. There is a difference there. And Mimi is kind of a good way of showing that pacifistic nature. She doesn't like fighting. She doesn't agree with fighting, but she knows at times that she has to fight. And so that's what happens there. They find out all, why they were all chosen to be DigiDestined, and Mimi and Joe kind of stay together because Joe's just going to kind of stay with Mimi to help kind of protect her. And Matt goes off on his own, and then Ty, Sora, Izzy, Kari, and TK go off. And the other group defeat Puppetmon, and they defeat Machinedramon, and then they're working their way up Spiral Mountain to go and deal with the Dark Masters. And Mimi and Joe, and I mentioned this in Joe's video, they end up interacting. They encounter Ogremon, and he's injured, and Mimi has Joe treat him, and they end up and then they have to deal with Metal Edamon, and and that's just, Metal Edamon is just a jerk, as I mentioned. And then of course they end up meeting Saber Leomon, and Saber Leomon, he showed up, he fought off Metal Edamon, and then he was able to protect the group for a little bit, and they went and they kind of caught up with Leomon. And Ogremon and Leomon are like the two that are like two of the Digimon that are that are like rivals. We gotta fight each other all the time, kind of like Zangoose and Seviper in Pokemon. They're two like rival type species, and or it could just be that specific Leomon and that specific Ogremon that have this issue. I'm not sure. But they have this, they kind of talk a little bit, and then of course Metal Edamon shows back up again, and unfortunately this is when Saber Leomon, he jumps in front of this attack to protect Mimi, and he takes the brunt of the attack. And of course, Gomamon digivolves all the way up to Zudomon to defeat Metal Edamon, and so he's done. And then now they have to, now they have the goodbye with Leomon, where Leomon's, he's too gravely injured for him to go on. And we still have, it's like Mimi is crying, and Joe is, the whole, these bandages aren't going to do me any good anymore. And even Ogremon's crying because he's losing his rival. And so we get all these, this very, very sad moment. And like, I think this is kind of one of the moments also that kind of, Mimi had reached like this not the breaking point, but she reached this limit for, that she reached a limit. And now, like, what happens with Leomon makes her, like, have to get over that limit. So that way, she's like, okay, we're going to find the rest of our friends that are still around. And then we're going to go up that frickin' mountain. And then we're going to go and we're going to defeat Piedmon. We're going to defeat the rest of the Dark Masters. And save the digital world so that way the others can come back. and they travel around and they find Frigimon and Marimon, and they got Ogremon, and they find like the Gekkomon and the Otamamon, and they find Unimon, and they so they're finding all of these different allies that they have and everything, all their friends, and they find Elecmon, and this and then Joe goes off to go and find Matt. And so Mimi's kind of on her own, and then they make it all the way up. Mimi's one of the ones that does not get turned into a keychain because she's not up there when Piedmont's turning everybody into keychains. But she shows up after the fact, after Magna Angemon shows up, which will be in TK's video, which will be the next video. And then Mimi and all the Digimon show up, and they help fight Piedmon, and they help defeat Piedmon, and then of course they deal with Apocalypse and him and his depression issues. I'm going to make a video where I just kind of talk about some of the, the evil Digimon throughout the first season, Devimon, Myotismon, the Dark Masters, Apocalypse, stuff like that. Kind of talk about them, Edamon. I'm going to make a video where I kind of talk about some of them. That might be something that I do like as a buffer in between, like, talking about the, after I finish talking about TK and Kari and before I go into the Adventures 2 kids. I'm still going to do all these kind of in one section, but I'm just going to do like maybe a couple of small little buffer things before I go into season 2. But what ends up happening is, they deal with Myota, they deal with Apocalypse and everything, and then of course it's, Jenai's like, well, the time's going to run out soon, and you're all going to have to go back home, and, and you won't be able to come back. And Mimi is looking all over to try to find Palmon, and they can't find Palmon, and Palmon's off hiding because she's like, I don't want to have Mimi say goodbye to me, because if she says goodbye, then I know I won't see her again. And so Palmon's very, very sad about that, and like she talks to this one of the Gekkomon and the Otamamon that are there, and they're like, man, Palmon, why aren't you going to go say goodbye to Princess Mimi and everything? And she's like, I don't want to say goodbye to Mimi because then I know I won't see her again. But, Palmon, does run out at the last minute, and she's like running along the train car as it's going, as, all the rest of the Digimon are like waving goodbye. And like, I think Mimi like throws her hat out to Palmon, and Mimi's just like waving at Palmon, like, bye Palmon, I love you. Palmon's like, I love you, Mimi. Those moments, of course, and they're all running off and everything, and so they still get that goodbye. And then of course we get the Digimon dealing with the Aboromon. Mimi is on vacation in Hawaii at this point in time, and we just get some small little clips of her, or like a couple of flashes of her in Hawaii. Not too much there. And then of course we have the the events from like in between, from like the summer of like 2000 or whatever, that where they go back to the digital world, and they have to give up their crest to help revitalize the barrier around the digital world, to help make it stronger, to help protect the digital world better, of course. And they get to see their Digimon again. And then of course and as I mentioned, there are a few bits where they have done some different audio material for Digimon. And one of the ones that they did was Mimi has since this time moved to New York. And she was in New York when September 11th happened. And they actually make a comment. There's one of the, I don't remember if it was just like an audio material thing that was released in Japan. But because 9/11 was unfortunately one of those things that did have like major repercussions around the world, and it's just one of those horrible things that happened. And yes, I remember I remember being I know what happened on that day. I remember watching that happen at school. But Mimi and her parents are in in New York, in the United States at this point in time, and on September 11th, what they have is they have it that Mimi rushes to Ground Zero, and she meets a bunch of the American DigiDestined and their Digimon, and they help rescue and look for survivors in the rubble of the World Trade Center in this, in this like little audio thing that they have. Ultimately, unfortunately, they're forced to leave because they can't let the Digimon be discovered. But they have a thing where like her and her mom cook for the rescuers, because Mimi and her mom both like cooking. Odd recipes, but they like cooking. So I like that they kind of put that in there. You could probably go and like find information about that like what Mimi did with that. But I just find that as like a very sweet thing that does seem like a Mimi thing to do. You know, that's that moment made its way into a lot of pulp culture. It made its way into like DC and Marvel comic books and a whole bunch of other things. And I like that they did that with Digimon. That was like, well, Mimi was in America, so she would have done something. She was in New York. Mimi knows she would have done something in that case, and she did. I like that they threw that in there. Uh, and then, of course, then we get into Digimon 2.0, which is, in 2002 in the Digimon timeline. Mimi has very much acclimated to living in America and everything. She seems to be very fluent in both Japanese and, English. And she's met a bunch of the American DigiDestined and such. And what ends up happening is they Mimi is of course informed by, I think they just say that it's Matt that informed her about what's going on with the Digimon Emperor in the digital world. And Mimi comes to Japan during Golden Week in Japan, so the group's kind of off school at the moment. And Mimi, of course, she's got the pig hair now and the red, white, blue outfit, kind of, the stars in her hair. And Mimi shows up at the school and she meets Davis and the new kids and everything. And of course, TK and Kari are very happy to see her again. And they go to the digital world. And while they're there, Mimi and Yoli kind of start to develop a friendship. And, Mimi, they're having this big picnic in the digital world, just to have time to relax in the digital world. And what ends up happening is Mimi ends up, Mimi and Yoli and Hawkmon end up kind of getting separated from the group. And they end up in this very dark section of the forest. And they're like, well, where are we now? And then we see all these red eyes pop up. And they come out and they start chanting, Princess Mimi, Princess Mimi. And it's a bunch of the Otamamon and the Gekkomon. Unfortunately, they all have black rings, dark rings on them. So, they start attacking, and Mimi keeps wanting to see Palmon, everything, she sees like a flower, and she thinks that it's going to pop up and be Palmon. And, while they're about to get attacked by a bunch of the Gekkomon and the Otamamon that are being controlled by the Digimon Emperor, not through their own will, bunch of vines pop out of the bushes, wrap around them, and pull them out of the way. And, Mimi's just, like vines wrapped around their head. Palmon? And then, pulled out of the way. And Mimi just sees Palmon, and they're just like, and they just, hug, and they're so happy to see each other and everything. And, and then, Mimi and, Hawkmon, Yoli and Mimi and Hawkmon and Palmon work together to destroy the control spire and to release all this Gekkomon and everything, and the rest of the DigiDestined come and find them, and they're like, oh, yay, everybody's okay, and we're good. So we have that fun moment. And then a little bit later, when they're still having to deal with Ken, the DigiDestined are at this restaurant in the digital world, and they're having to deal with Digitamamon again, because it's one of his other restaurants. And Yoli and Digitamamon are having a disagreement over payment. And TK's like, wait a second, I recognize you. You were that Digimon that tortured my brother and Joe back when we were here the first time and everything. And Digitamamon's like, yes, I know that, and I realized that I was rotten back then, and now I'm looking to do looking on the positive side of things and trying to be better and everything. And he does honestly seem like he's trying to be better, except he's still slightly greedy in regards to what kind of money he can accept. And Mimi and another DigiDestined, Michael, who is from America, pops up, and she's like, well, and Michael's like, well, how about I pay for this? And Yoli just kind of has a crush on Michael instantly. But what ends up happening is, Mimi and, Michael and the rest of the, they get caught up and they talk to Michael, and Mimi's like, well, Michael's a DigiDestined too, and I'm going to go over Michael when I do a miscellaneous DigiDestined. And his Digimon is Batamon. I think his Digimon can digivolve into Seedramon. Don't know if this is the same Seedramon that they fought way back at the beginning of the series that Joe fought, or that Matt fought, or if it's just It's a different one. It just happens to be a Batamon. And what ends up happening is the restaurant gets attacked by Gorillamon. And Michael mentions, oh yeah, I remember when he tried to climb the Empire State Building or the Chrysler Building or whatever in New York when I was a kid. That was the first time I saw Digimon. I was like, Gorillamon. Like, of course it was, because we have to throw in the obligatory King Kong reference. And, so he's being controlled by a dark ring, of course, and Mimi and Mimi and Palmon and Michael and Batamon, they digivolve, to Seedramon and Togemon and such, and they defeat Gorillamon to get him to calm down, and they get rid of the dark ring, and then Mimi just kind of it's just like, now you're going to behave now, aren't you, type thing. And what ends up happening is it's actually Gorillamon was kind of a distraction, because Ken then shows up and puts a dark spiral inside of Digitamamon, because he's a higher level Digimon, and he puts the dark spiral inside of him so he can control Digitamamon, and then he has Digitamamon attack the rest of the group, and he's returns to how he's meaner than he was before, and he attacks Mimi, and which angers Yoli, and Yoli just kind of, Yoli just basically yells at Digitama. It's like, you were being, Mimi was being so nice to you, and she was giving you a chance, and then now you're doing this, and blah, 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 blah. And, and then this is when Yoli gets her Digi-Egg of Sincerity. And, Pokemon Digivolves into Sherrymon, and then is able to, destroy the dark spiral inside of Digitamamon and free him, and he's back, making him go back to normal, and and he's like still apologizing and everything, it's like Mimi is fine now and everything, the group's okay. And then of course Mimi shows up again for the anniversary, of course, for when they defeated Malamyotismon, or for when they defeated Myotismon, and Mimi, they're there, witnesses what happens with Wizardmon and Kari and Gatomon, and of course Wizardmon saying, you have to defeat Ken with kindness, and Mimi is not part of the group that goes camping and everything, but the rest of them do. And what ends up happening is then in autumn, after they've defeated Ken, and they're the DigiDestined are like, well, we're gonna work on trying to help rebuild the digital world, get it fixed up again from when all the destruction that Ken caused and everything. And what ended up happening is Mimi was visiting the digital world, because she can now kind of travel back and forth in and out of the digital world, and she's feeding a bunch of these little baby Digimon that are adorable, that are called Yukimi Botamon, and they're just these adorable little white puffball Digimon that look like marshmallows, and she's like feeding them. She's just like having fun with them. And Palmon actually witnesses Arukenimon, who is just another evil Digimon that I'll go over later on. She can turn control spires into Digimon, and she turns one of the control spires into a Golemmon, and she orders it to destroy a nearby dam that the DigiDestined were trying to fix. And Mimi and Palmon are able to deliver a message to the rest of the group that no, that's not a real he's not a real Digimon. He's a control spire, and they're able to defeat him and everything. There's not too much, but this kind of helps show a turning point in their relationship with Ken, because Ken knows that they're control spire Digimon and that he's actually been trying to destroy them. And this is, of course, when the DigiDestined start, destroying the control spires and such, making that, one of their priorities. And then, of course, we have the Digimon Christmas thing and the Digimon World Tour. Mimi, along with the rest of the DigiDestined, the DigiDestined send Palmon in a bag send it through a portal into, Mimi's bedroom. So when Mimi wakes up, Mimi, she'll have Palmon there. And then we have the Digimon World Tour, where they all go off. And it's Davis, Ken, and Matt land in New York, and Mimi is there with Palmon, and they land in New York, and then Matt and Ken, did they land in New York or did they land somewhere else first? I don't remember, but like they land somewhere, and then like Matt and Ken head off to go to South America, go to Mexico to deal with that, and they meet Rosa and everything, like I mentioned in Matt's video. And then Davis and Michael, because Michael's dad is a pilot, they go one way, and then Michael and Davis head to New York, and they get to see Mimi again, and Mimi and Davis are kind of the old and the new that are kind of paired up in this case, which is fine. And so they're dealing with that, and they deal with Davis gets to meet a whole bunch of these New York DigiDestined and everything, American DigiDestined, and these might be some of the DigiDestined that maybe helped Mimi back what happened in the September 11th and everything. And so they deal with that. They have to there's a Cherrymon that attacks like the tree at Rockefeller Center, and they get it to calm down, and they get all this stuff taken care of. And and then of course Mimi and Palmon celebrate with her parents and everything. But what had happened was like her parents are trying to escape because there's like Digimon popping up everywhere. They're like, we left Japan because of this, and now they're here, and what are we gonna do now? And they get they're dealing with that and everything. Her parents are having like an existential crisis, and Mimi is just calm. And then of course we get the moment where Mimi's not there when like everything's happening with like Oikawa and the dark children and the dark sport children, but she is she's not at the summer camp either when like the kids go back to the summer camp, when the older DigiDestined go back to the summer camp, because Mimi is of course in New York at this time. But like her and the rest of the DigiDestined that are in New York are all they're all using their digivices, the lights on their digivices, to kind of break away the darkness that Malamayotismon is trying to spread all over the world. And so Mimi's in New York, and she's doing that, using her digivice there and everything, holding it up and everything, and the rest of the DigiDestineds in New York and around the world are doing the same thing. And she then Digilight travels to the digital world with the rest of the older DigiDestined or the other DigiDestined to get there and be with their partner Digimon. And and then of course they use their digivices to weaken Malamayotismon so that way they can defeat him. There's not really, that's what happens there. And then of course we get the 2003 section, which is Diaboromon's Revenge. Mimi, she's traveling on a plane first, and then she lands and she finds Izzy, and of course she's just like, why isn't anybody happy to see me? Why aren't blah 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 blah. And Izzy's just like, hi Mimi, how are you? Type thing. And Mimi, she still witnesses what happens with like Omnimon and the Omniblade and Imperial Vermon Paladinmon and defeating Armageddonmon. And then we get into Digimon Adventure Tri, which is Mimi is still off in New York at the beginning of it, and Izzy and Ty are actually trying to figure out, well, nobody really can come to Ty's soccer game, so Izzy is like, well, let me message Mimi and she can come and see if she can come, get it on a plane soon enough. She can come here and, she can be here for your soccer game on the weekend or whatever. And Ty's like, well, I guess it's better than no one. But, Mimi had arrived at the airport, at a different airport, when everything happened with the Kawagamon attack. And what ends up happening is Himakawa is actually there, gets her from the airport and takes her to where Tai and the rest of the group are. And what ends up happening is she's got like a whole, because, all the Digimon just, did a whole battle and everything. So they're hungry. So she's got like lots of treats and everything for them. And, this is when Izzy starts, his crush on Mimi just kind of skyrockets and very much comes apparent. So we have those moments, and like Mimi just kind of teases him at one point. So we have those moments that happen with them, which is just kind of adorable. And Mimi explains, well, my parents are actually moving back here because my dad got a different job, or my dad's job moved him back here and everything. So we're going to be moving back here. So it really wasn't a big deal for me to come back now anyway. My parents are coming and blah, 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 blah. And now I'm going to get to be in the same school with you guys, in the same class and such. And Mimi is actually in the same class as Mako. And so, we get those moments. She meets Mako. They, Mako and Meikumon, and then of course they go to the spa, and Mimi and Meikumon, Mimi is trying to be very nice to Mako. She keeps calling her Mei Mei as, as a nickname and everything. And so we get those moments and everything. Mimi is always very, very welcoming, of course, to like anybody new. She got along with, the rest of the new DigiDestined very quickly. And then, of course, we get to where they're going to do like the cultural festival at their school, and Mimi kind of is the one that kind of jumps up to try to do all these suggestions. We're like, well, why don't we do a cafe and everything, and and then why don't we make it based on this restaurant chain in America that's called Daters, which, as I mentioned, is, I'm pretty sure, supposed to be like a slight play off on like Hooters, although the outfits are not nearly as revealing. And a bunch of the girls in the class are like, why would we want to wear that and everything? And Mimi's like, come on, it'll be fun. I can make the costumes and everything, and and blah 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 blah. And as I mentioned, I kind of mentioned this in Izzy's video, and I'll mention it here again with Mimi. For the actual human characters for Digimon, they don't really seem to over sexualize them. They don't have like out of proportion bodies and everything. And most of the DigiDestined are actually, particularly the girls, are very much the kind of basic human proportions, not like the type stuff that goes on with like One Piece. The female Digimon, on the other hand, are a little bit more defined in that area. But the human DigiDestined, Kari and Mimi and Sora and Mako and Yoli and such, they don't like overly sexualize them, which I like. And they definitely make the point of pointing out that out of all of the DigiDestined, out of all of the female DigiDestined in the original series, Mimi is definitely the one that's the most comfortable with her body. And that's kind of shown here with what happens with, Mimi wanting to do these different outfits. And Mimi and Mako actually go out to, they go out to find different things that they can use, making the different outfits and everything. And they bond over this. And Mako's very good at like drawing out like what the kind of the outfits can look like. And they just kind of all have, her and Palmon and Mako and Meikumon have, just kind of have, a little snack at this cafe. And then unfortunately, Ogremon appears. And Mimi knows that this is the Ogremon that was their friend, but unfortunately, he has been infected by this virus that's going around throughout the Digimon. And Mimi, tries to stop him and get him to calm down and everything. And she has Palmon digivolve into Togemon to fight him. And what ends up happening is, unfortunately, there's a lot of damage that's caused, and a bunch of the people are, blaming Togemon for the damage and blaming the good Digimon for the damage, which is kind of a running theme throughout Digimon Tri-End and Digimon 2020 for the last evolution. And what ends up happening is, this is when they get reintroduced to Leomon, and he's okay, and everybody's happy about this. And then, of course, we have the sports festival, and Mako and Mimi, as I said, they bonded over making the cheerleading outfits, and Mako and Mimi are actually the only two that actually wear the cheerleading outfits. But we have it where, like the day before this cultural festival, Mimi and Joe actually ended up having this conversation, as I mentioned in Joe's video, where Joe is complaining about the fact of, why do we have to have all of this pressure on us? Why is it our job to have to protect everything, to try to stop all of these problems? Why is it, why is the weight of the world on our shoulders? And Mimi's, of course, complaining and worrying about the fact is, the girls in her class kept calling her a narcissist because she's like, she'll take over everything. And she's, she's like, she's the one that's perfectly fine with wearing these revealing outfits, but, that doesn't mean that everybody else is. And Mimi and Joe, Kari overhears, of course, the conversation, as I mentioned. But, Joe and his, Joe and Mimi, that's kind of one of the moments where we do kind of have them bonding. And as I mentioned, Izzy got the email about, those who, look into darkness in oneself and beyond it find power and everything, which is, of course, very much kind of the theme for what, particularly what Matt and Mimi have to, or what Joe and Mimi have to go through in this case. Some of the others have to go through it as well, or something similar to it. But what ends up happening is, of course, then at the Culture War Festival, Mimi and Mako are the only two wearing the outfits because Mako made them, and she'll dress that way with Mimi because Mimi is her friend, and they're there and they're having fun, and they're the one dancing and everything, and as I mentioned, Himakawa sends Izzy a picture of Mimi in her cheerleading outfit, and Izzy then shows up and actually sees it, and he's just like blushing the entire time. And then the rest of the Digimon show up because they kind of coerced Leomon into taking them to the festival because they want food. And of course, then there's a whole costume contest thing that happens, and then Mimi and Mako are there when they see Ken, or what appears to be Digimon Emperor Ken. He's actually Jedi in disguise. Kidnap Mako, Mekumon, and Leomon appears and he tries to fight, and then Mimi and then Kari goes off and talks to Joe, as I said, and then Joe shows up, and then Mimi and Joe are able to look past the darkness that was in them, and they're able to then get their Digimon to digivolve all the way to their highest level, and Mimi Palmon into Togemon into Lilymon, and then Lilymon into Rosemon, who is very pretty. I haven't mentioned this yet, but I love the new digivolving sequences that they had for the Digimon. Even just like how it brings in like different components from the original variations that we would see when they originally digivolved way back in the first season, and then even into the second season. It's a new take on that, and I like that they did those variations there. I think they were beautifully done, and they're able to they're able to defeat the Dark Jedi, the Ken, for the time being, but unfortunately Mako still Mekumon goes kind of out of control and disappears, and they lose Leomon again in that time frame. And then of course we have everything that goes on with with everybody finding out about the virus, and then it's spreading, and there's going to be the digital world reboot and everything, and all the Digimon finding out that some of them are infected, and Mimi and all the Digimon spend time with their DigiDestined and everything, and Mimi and Palmon just kind of talk, and Mimi's just telling Palmon funny stories and everything, and Mimi and Palmon's just kind of enjoying spending time with Mimi. And then of course we have the moment where they're having to kind of deal with Mekumon, and all the DigiDestined are all the Digimon at this point have become infected, and the countdown is the countdown to the reboot is going on, and we have the Digimon there and the DigiDestined there, and then the reboot happens, and that's just one of the hard things that you watch. And then of course all the DigiDestined are like, okay, we have to go and find our Digimon, we have to find them because we're not whole without them. And they go to the digital world and they find their Digimon in their baby forms, and they start bonding with their Digimon and everything. And I just those little moments where they're trying to bond with their Digimon are very adorable, in my opinion. I think that they are just so cute. And like all the Digimon are eating, and Mimi is still playing up on the fact that she knows that Izzy has a crush on her, and she makes this like weird jelly bean egg roll thing and tries to give it to Izzy, and he's just like, no. And so we just get funny moments like that. Mimi gets her cooking skills from her mother, which I'll kind of go over, but they end up having to they end up getting separated at one point, and I don't remember exactly who Mimi has when they get separated. I know that Palmon ends up with like Joe and Patamon on top of a mountain, but I don't remember exactly where. Mimi and Tentomon. Mimi gets paired up with Tentomon when they're all separated, and they end up at like a Japanese style castle somewhere. So I mean, like Mimi and Tentomon have had to work together before, so I mean, like way back when, so that's not really a hard thing to do. But they still can't digivolve, unfortunately, and of course they have to deal with Dark Jedi, and they have to deal with all these other Digimon that are trying to kill them because the digital world sees them as an infection, and they all end up getting, reunited and everything, and then they end up back in the real world, and then they end up at the school, and then they end up, back in the digital world, and there's, more huge battles going on, and then, they think that Tai and Nishijima are dead. Admittedly, Nishijima does die, and, they deal with a bunch of that, and they have the whole huge battle with, Ordinamon, because Kari kind of snapped, and I don't blame Kari. And, we get those moments, and, then we have it where, Izzy has to hack into Meikumon and get everybody, get all the Digimon's memories back, so that way they can, so they can, have, be at their full power again, and they all digivolve to their, their mega or their ultimate forms, and then they all digivolve into, Omnimon Merciful mode, and they're able to, take down Ordinamon and, kind of free Meikumon from, having the virus and everything. And, Meikumon, of course, dies, as I mentioned. But, we get those moments, and then we get, that, they're all still friends with Meiko and everything, so I still like that. And then, of course, we get into Digimon 2010, or in the time frame, which is Digimon 2020, which is the Digimon The Last Evolution. Which, by this point in time, Mimi is making an internet empire of fashion. And, unfortunately, she can't go to join a bunch of the battles. Also, I think she's kind of, well, that's kind of the problem is that I don't know if, is Mimi still in Japan when this is going on, or is Mimi back in New York? I don't remember if they 100% state exactly where Mimi is, but as I mentioned in Sora's video, at one point, Sora and Mimi kind of have they talk, they have like a webcam talk, video call, and and Mimi's like, well, I couldn't go to the battle and everything, but I'm glad that everybody was okay and everything. And so we get those moments, and what ends up happening is at one point in the movie, as I said, Mimi does get her her consciousness taken away, and Palmon disappears because of Minowa and Eosmon. But it's Minowa is actually able to track them kind of through their phones, through their Digivice phones. And I'm sure that Izzy informed Mimi about what was going on with the timers on Matt and Ty's phones. And, Sora probably got informed by that as well. And Sora's technically the first one that loses her Digimon in that case. And then Matt and Ty. But, we get those moments, and, Mimi's in, the digital world, in the little mini world that, Minowa created. And she's there kind of under Minowa's control, and then she snaps out of it when Ty blows the whistle, and her and the rest of the DigiDestined that are there help fight against Minowa, and they get to see, the Agumon Bond of Courage, and, Gabumon Bond of Friendship, and they see that. And, there's just, that whole moment that happens there. And, they're of course sad that Ty and Matt have to say goodbye to their Digimon. And of course, they were all very, very sad probably when they heard that Sora had to say goodbye to Biyomon, and the rest of them didn't even know. As I mentioned, all of the Digidestined are very close, not just with their own Digimon, but also with each other. And they also are very close and care for each other's Digimon. Tai cares about Gatomon, not just because she's Kari's Digimon, but she's also, his friend. And I kind of, I don't remember if I mentioned this in Tai's video, but I'll mention it now, and I might try to mention it again in Kari's video, if I think about it. I kind of, Tai and Kari have, the brother-sister relationship, of course, because they're brother and sister. I think that Agumon and Gatomon kind of have the brother-sister relationship, but it's actually Gatomon is actually the older sibling in that instance. Partially because she's always in her champion mode most of the time, as opposed to Agumon in his rookie mode. It's also she has a lot more experience from having to deal with Myotismon, and I just think also Gatomon is more mature than Agumon. But the rest of the Digimon and the Digidestined, of course, they care about each other and each other's Digimon, of course. So, whenever any of them had to say goodbye to their Digimon, it's not just hurting them. They're not just losing a part of themselves. They're also, if, one of their friends' Digimon goes, that's still losing, losing a part of this friendship that has been around for a long time. And then, of course, we get into, we have the prologue or the epilogue, which, of course, is, happens in 2027. But at this point, Mimi has developed has become a famous and well-known chef. I would assume that she kind of also has like her fashion empire as well. And she has her co-host with Palmon, and she always has her, always has her cowboy hat on unless she's cooking for her show. And she has a son who has a Tanamon. As I said, we don't know who Mimi's husband is. I would be perfectly fine if it was Izzy, simply just because of, Izzy having the huge crush on her and everything. And I just like fan art of like Mimi and Izzy together because I just find them adorable. Moving on to the relationships, Mimi, of course, has her parents, Kisuki, Tachikawa, and who's her father, and then Satoi Tachikawa is her mother. Her mother and father, he's, they're interesting. They seem to be very happy with each other. Mimi seems to get her cooking skills from her mother because one of the first things that we see happen with her mother is her mother makes this weird rice dish with like whipped cream and strawberries on it, and apparently it turns out really good because Mimi's father eats it, which I'm pretty sure that's where like Mimi's cooking skills come from, is her mother. And as I mentioned in when I talked about the September 11th stuff that happened there, her mother, her Mimi and her mother cooked for a bunch of the rescuers and everything, which I like. I mean, I understand that is kind of, oh, that's kind of invading a thing, but that doesn't mean like that couldn't have happened in the time in like the digital world universe where they did that. I mean, perfectly fine with it in my opinion. Other things brought that in there, like as I mentioned, like Marvel and other comics, even just like the comic strips and the newspaper still brought that stuff into it. It's just like, it's not saying it didn't happen. It's just, what can we learn from it? And I like that they had that Mimi helped with that. But Mimi and, Mimi's parents don't really get too involved with the fight. Her parents kind of beg her not to get involved with the fight. They are there when like Mimi and the rest of the DigiDestined go back to the digital world in the first season. Like they plead with Mimi not to go, but she still goes. And then of course, later on we find out that her father specifically took this job in New York so that way they would be more away from the weird monsters, as him and as Mimi's parents refer to them. Mimi loves her parents, but she's also like, I have stuff that I have to do, so bye, at one point. And what ends up happening is, she has her son in the future, of course, and then we go through her relationship with the different DigiDestined. Mimi is perfectly fine with Tai being the leader because she sees goodness in his heart. And she, she's one of the ones that forgives him very quickly and tries to cheer him up when he makes, Agumon Dark Digivolve. And, they're very good to each other, and they have a very, they're on very good terms. I mean, there's still moments where like Tai, like way back in the beginning, where Tai just think that Mimi's a crybaby and everything. And, most of the group do kind of think that Mimi is a bit of a crybaby. Way back in the beginning. And then of course we have Matt. They don't do a whole lot of speaking directly to each other at the beginning, but they will talk about each other. And then it gets better. Matt will then defend Mimi's feelings later on. They all get better. Matt and Mimi start developing better relationship with each other. Matt's the one that informs her about what's going on with the Digimon Emperor and everything. Not too much there. Sora and Mimi, as I mentioned, Sora and Mimi are definitely each other's best friends. And like, as I've said before, Mimi gets married, Sora is probably her, and I just realized the fact that no, Sora doesn't have any siblings either. Why did that take me so long to remember that? I'm like, if you were one of the ones that like commented in this, like going through like all the DigiDestined that don't have siblings, or it's like Sora doesn't have a sibling either. I'm sorry. Sorry. Sora doesn't have a sibling. Mimi doesn't have a sibling. Izzy doesn't have a sibling, and Cody doesn't have a sibling out of the original ones. Sorry, out of them. But yeah, Mimi gets married. Sora's her maid of honor, in my opinion. Sora gets married. Mimi's the maid of honor. Vice versa type stuff. Or and then they have Palmon and Biomon as like their secondary maid of honors, or Palmon's the the flower bond, the flower girl at Mimi's wedding, no matter who her groom is, which again I'd be perfectly fine if it was Izzy. And moving on to Izzy, Izzy and Mimi, back in the beginning, they have a very tedious relation, tumultuous relationship that they go through, and it gets better. They kind of start to develop a bit more of a friendship when they have to deal with the labyrinth together, and Mimi is a little more accepting of the way that Izzy has to work in regards to tedious methods of analyzing things. And she gets better with that, and she's okay with that with Izzy after a while. And of course, in the not too much in the second season where you don't see them interact, but of course in Digimon Tri, Izzy has started to Izzy has his crush on Mimi, and Mimi's pretty sure pretty sure Mimi is aware of this crush. As I said, we don't really know if they ended up. If they end up together or not, I would be okay with that. If they did, I don't know. And then, of course, we have Mimi and Joe. In the beginning, Joe was apparently Mimi's camp counselor at the beginning, supposedly, according to like some of the novels that they did for like Digimon Adventure in the beginning. And then he did later, I think he developed a bit of a crush on Mimi at one point. And he does kind of treat her a little bit more like an older brother at times. He's the one that tries to defend her feelings and everything, and he's the one that stays with her, of course, when she leaves the group because she just doesn't want to fight anymore. And, he helps, try to, keep her safe and cheer her up later on. And then, of course, later on, Joe, they show this in the first Digimon movie, Joe left a whole bunch of like heart-shaped gifts at Mimi's house when she was in Hawaii. Mimi and TK, not too much that they interact with each other necessarily. She's there with the original group and everything, and she'll, of course, keep an eye on TK, of course. She doesn't seem to, Mimi isn't over the top and like, oh, I need to protect TK every minute of every day. She's like, well, yeah, she's not going to let TK get hurt, of course, if she's left in charge of him. And, she's often very good at like sharing things with him and talking with him, and they play and laugh together and everything. And 4 years later, they're still very good friends. Same thing with Kari. She doesn't really have too much interaction with Kari, actually. Even, like, before everything happens with Myotismon, she never actually ended up meeting Kari until, like, that moment. And then, later on, that Mimi and TK seem to have, Mimi and Kari seem to have gotten along quite a bit better. In the Digimon Adventure, in the movie that they did in, like, the third part of the first movie, it is mentioned that TK and Kari go to New York to visit Mimi. And we actually get a couple of they were cut out of the English version of the movie, but they do show Mimi, and then like apparently Mimi and a bunch of the older Digidestined all got like taken by Gekkomon and like put into like some type of sleep or whatever until everything finished up. I don't 100% know. That's not super prevalent in the movie, in the version of the movie that I've seen. I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying that I wasn't super familiar with that. But they go see Mimi and everything. And, so Mimi is very, good friends with, TK and Kari in that case. And then, of course, in Digimon Adventure 2.0, when they meet Davis, Davis and Mimi don't interact too much until until Davis goes to New York. And, they meet Willis and Davis and everything. And, Mimi is there. Apparently, Mimi had invited Willis and Davis over for summer vacation at some point in like 2003, according to one of the other audio materials or one of the novels. And then, of course, Mimi and Davis are, of course, paired up when they have to do the Digimon World Tour, because they're, you know, Davis goes to New York and everything, and they work together there. And also, I think Mimi would be able to give, you know, kind of like critique Davis's fashion style. She's like, the flames are okay. Better shoes. I don't know. And then of course we have Mimi and Yoli. Yoli looks up to Mimi as very much as a role model and an older sister type figure, because Yoli doesn't have the best relationship with her actual sister. With her actual older sibling, she looks at Mimi as an older sister, and they get along very, very well. And you know, she shows confusion when when she watches Mimi interact with Digitalmon, of course, and of course Mimi is there when Yoli gets her Digi Egg of Sincerity, of course. And then, of course, Mimi and Cody, she just sees Cody as a vital member of the team. They don't interact too much beyond, you know, pleasantries and getting to meet each other a little bit. And then, of course, we have Mimi and Ken. She, of course, didn't necessarily like Ken, of course, when he was the Digimon Emperor. But then later on, Mimi is actually the first one to extend trust to Ken, when, you know, Palmon sees, you know, Arukenimon create, you know, Golemon out of the control spire, and then, you know, they tell Ken about it, and Mimi is the first one that does not hesitate to ask Ken for help. And so I like that Mimi is just like, he's, you know, give him a chance. And I do like that they do that with Mimi, that they use Mimi in that way for that. I think I've gone through everything. Well, Mimi is very good friends with Michael as well. They met, of course, in New York at some point. I think Michael and Mimi actually go to the same school, I think is where they were headed with that. We don't really get to hear too much about Michael later on, unfortunately, and I will talk about Michael when I do the miscellaneous DigiDestined. Let's see here. Mimi does get along very well with her parents, and she does love her parents. You know, and her parents seem to be kind of okay with, like, Palmon and such, but they're just not as super happy with, like, the rest of the Digimon that cause problems. I'm like, hey, your kid's a DigiDestined. I'm sorry you have to put up with this. Bye. So that's what we got for Mimi. DigiDestined of Sincerity. She'll definitely tell you what she thinks of you. And if you hurt her friends, you will pay very dearly. But that kind of just implies to, like, any of the DigiDestined, you hurt my friends, you will pay. Also, if you just have, like, a horrible fashion statement, Mimi will just give you a complete and utter makeover. So, Mimi, I thank you very much for watching. The next one will be TK, who is, of course, Hope. And then I will do Kari, and then I think I'm going to do just a couple of videos where I talk about just some of, like, what we know about the, like, the bad Digimon that they deal with in the original season, and maybe some stuff that we learned about in the first season. And then I'll do, you know, Davis, Ken, Yoli, Cody, and then the miscellaneous Digimon. Mako will get her own video. Same thing with Willis. Michael won't, but he'll be one of the major ones that I talk about when I talk about the other miscellaneous DigiDestined that they meet during the Digimon World Tour. I would have liked it if they brought, like, Willis in during the Digimon World Tour. That would have been fine, but they didn't, unfortunately. You know, but that's what I got. I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.
I didn't even want to go to camp in the first place. I just wanted to go to the mall. Can't somebody else save this silly world besides me?